Welcome back. All right, welcome back, everyone. As you can see, well, people on the YouTube, we have a special guest in-house. This is the Everyday Rich podcast. Welcome back if it's your second time or multiple times. Appreciate you for joining. If you're new to this, your Everyday Rich podcast is a podcast about living room conversations surrounding financial literacy and topics that you probably have with yourself or other people inside your house, but not sure if these topics happen outside of that. But I know that maybe you've brought it up and you're concerned, and the idea is to empower you with lessons and tips that people have gone through who are trying to build their everyday rich so that they can live free of financial issues, but also build a life that they really want to. And part of that obviously revolves around some money, wealth, but things outside of that as well. So we will introduce our guest very shortly. He's staring at me right here, looking at me, but this is our very first in-person podcast. But like all our other podcasts, we like to highlight small businesses, and the small business I'm going to highlight again is Plantwell Inc., who is our good friends. Plantwell Inc. is a grow store for all your growing needs. So fertilizer, all that stuff, all the nutrients for grow enthusiasts, whether your grass, your plants, or your other greenery that is consumed. Go check them out, Plantwell Inc., our good friends. Ask for Dennis. He's my man. But today, we have a very special guest in-house. His name is Ron Esteban. And I met Ron a few years ago through a real estate network, but also turned into a trading network, so stock trading network. And this big rabbit hole that we've both been down, and I've been fortunate enough to interact with Ron a lot and see his growth as a trader and a stock investor now, to really kind of where he started his journey only a few years ago. So part of what we're chatting about bringing Ron on is because he's got a really unique story about his journey into building kind of his financial journey. And that whole evolution of really kind of how he's living his everyday rich, how he's sculpting it. Because, Ron is a big family guy and is a teacher. We'll get into it. And let him explain his story. But I'm going to give some high points here. Jen is not here, so anyone audio is listening. Jen is not here because we don't have a third mic set up yet. We haven't figured that out. So if anyone knows how to do that, help me out. So Ron kicked Jen out here. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you. Welcome, special guest Ron Esteban.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for listening to that very, very horrible introduction there. I didn't have ChatGPT make it up for me, so I had to make it up on the fly.
Well, I started paying attention when you started talking about fertilizer and lawns and so on. So
yeah,
that has been my rabbit hole these last few months.
And this is the funny thing where when you talk to people immediately, like you find out that they kind of like these small little these things that you think no one else enjoys. And it was funny when we found out that you were doing lawn maintenance and all that stuff. There was this popular saying that someone told me. It was like, as you go through your life and your journey, try to outsource all these low value activities, right? This whole thing about outsourcing everything of your life, where I realized it was like you outsource all the fun and some of the enjoyment that some people don't see it as fun, but it might be for you.
Mm-hmm.
So why? Okay, I'm just gonna get that. How did you get down this? Like
with the lawn and fertilizer and so on. Well, it really started last summer when we had a pool installed, and then our front grass took a beating because I couldn't really water it or take care of it as much as because the the bobcat would go back and forth, and by the end of the summer we just had a grass filled with dandelions and crabgrass. The day it really hit me was, and I said never again, was literally a year ago, almost to the day, we were getting ready for our daughter's first birthday party. And this was the first time we had family and friends over to celebrate because we just moved in several months earlier. And I spent literally half a day picking out all the dandelions the day before. And the day of the birthday party, I woke up and I was, feeling good about how the day was going to go. And I swear they multiplied 3 times over that morning, that 24-hour period when I woke up, and it was all over again. And I was like, so I spent a couple hours trying to get as much, and I mowed the grass and but they just kept coming back. It was like it was basically a night and day situation from last year to now where I don't have to deal with that, but it was horrible. And I told Ashley, my wife, I said, I'm never going through that again. That's like half a day of my life wasted for no reason.
So through necessity of that, you became a lawn care enthusiast.
I did, yeah. I mean, if you talk to my wife and pretty much all the neighbors that walk across, they see me out on my lawn pretty much every day for a couple hours at a time, leveling it, mowing it, fertilizing it, overseeding it these last few months. So I got to know my neighbors really well. But also it provided a sort of like a mental break from the day, like when we talk about, full-time jobs, these side hustles, family, different types of responsibilities, that's sort of my happy place. I could just manually work and not think about too much about what's going on outside of that, 2,500 square feet of grass that I'm taking care of at that moment.
Yeah, and I think that's important because like you're, we live in a society where it's very go with your full time, especially with young families like yourself, and finding this downtime becomes tough because then we're like pulled so many directions. Like, well, do I watch Netflix? Do I scroll on my phone? Right. Do I read? Do I whatever? Right. And you found something that it is a stress relief,
right? And it's something that I actually enjoy because one, you're outside, you're getting fresh air compared to, if you were inside doing, whatever, Netflix, like you mentioned. But it's also like it gives me a purpose during that 1 or 2 hours that I'm out there. Kind of like when I was coaching. I used to coach amateur sports and at a high level, and those 1 or 2 hours, I put myself mentally and physically in that space so I can focus on those kids that I was coaching or the games that I was coaching in. And I just treated it the same way. Like, I've got an hour of time here. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to take care of. Anything that was bothering me or something that was on my plate that I had to worry about or take care of, I was going to do it after that 1 hour of allotted time I put towards the lawn. And it gave me a sense of, accountability, because much like anything else, like we're going to talk about these side hustles in real estate and stock trading and so forth. It really provided me an opportunity to say, okay, I've got an hour to do this, an hour to do that. And it really gave my day a sense of purpose. Mm-hmm. And I wake up every morning with a sense of purpose. This is what I got to do. Yeah.
Well, that's great. It really helps when you kind of try to prioritize that and really figure out like, okay, well, this is what I need to spend my time with, right? And we were mentioning, like, before we kind of go down the rabbit hole of all these things, right? Like, so can you tell the 5 people that listen to this podcast? So, Ron, like, obviously we established you're a family guy, you have kids. what's your 9 to 5? What do you do?
Well, I'm an educator.
Yep.
A teacher in the secondary panel of the Halton Catholic District School Board. I actually got my 20-year certificate about 2 weeks ago or a week ago. So I've been in it for a while, and those 20 years just flew by so quickly. So that's my 9 to 5 job.
How is it possible you've been working for 20 years? Because you look like 29. So.
Oh my God, I do not look anything close to like 29. Maybe if I was 50 pounds lighter, I'd look a little bit younger.
Well, Ron has the attitude and personality of like a 15-year-old, very young. So like that's the energy you have to carry on with you, regardless of your age. So anyway, that's a sidebar. But okay, cool. We're gonna say educator, teacher. You have teaching background experience, so I would assume that comes with a pretty consistent schedule. I would say.
Yep.
And there's obviously a lot of benefits, including like pension. Mm-hmm. Like if you're a teacher, then growing up, were your parents immigrated here to Canada from the Philippines? Or?
Yep.
Okay.
That's right. Yep.
All right. So you grew up in an immigrant family like myself. Were your parents teachers as well? And like,
no, they were. My dad worked at Ford for over 30 years and retired there about 10 years ago. So that I guess when he got here, he worked some odd jobs before he got on with Ford. And my mom worked a number of clerical work, in the office type of work that she could get over the years when she wasn't raising kids and so forth. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So then you have brothers as well. Mm-hmm. Growing up in this kind of household, I mean, like any immigrant family, I'd imagine money's tight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, did you grow up wealthy?
100% no.
Okay. All right. Okay. We have not interviewed anyone that grew up around money yet.
Yeah. No, money was definitely a topic where it was even a stress on between my parents and with us. Like we could sense that stress because, obviously my dad worked shift work and my mom would work whenever, we were older. Yeah. And she didn't have to depend on we didn't have to depend on her as much. So we could sense that there was a lot of working in shifts and so on. And that when it came to, luxury items like vacations or, just higher end items in the house, like furniture or whatnot, we didn't have that. And it was very much, if we need it, we'll get it. If we don't, we ain't touching it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, Filipino family, did you wrap your furniture in plastic, the couches?
Fortunately, we didn't have to get to that point. My mom and dad early on established fear in us to not eat on the couch or anything that would get stained pretty quickly. But the reality was is that we had an orderly household, mm-hmm. And if we could avoid damaging anything or breaking anything, we did at all costs.
Yeah, it gets scary when they employ that fear, right? Instead of fear, it's like no, don't touch anything. Yeah. So it's kind of like what we do now with our kids. Like, get off, stop it.
Yeah, and I guess that's why we spent so much time outside.
Fair enough.
We would be at other people's places. We bike down the road to the park, or we'd get jobs early on. It was like we weren't in the house very often to damage it as much. There are occasional times we would.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. All right, that's cool. Okay, so then like growing up around that. It obviously shapes you somehow. It shapes us, depending on obviously the environment we grew up around.
Yeah.
So if money was obviously tight, just like it was in my family, then growing up, do you feel like, did you have these conversations at home about money or anything like that? Or was it kind of like, get a good job, like educate, get a stable job, work that job, and you'll be fine kind of thing? Was that the message that you kind of heard at home?
Honestly, when growing up, the only thing that was reiterated to myself and my brothers were save your money. Save your money. Don't spend it. Save your money.
Yeah.
There was no talk about, what kind of job opportunities were out there that you could, work towards. It was more like just get a job, save your money.
Yeah.
other words like investments or compounding or anything that, I'm doing now was rarely talked about, if talked about at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much just a save your money type of household.
Yeah. It sounds very common. That was very similar to my family.
Yeah.
And my relatives, friends. Like the word save is almost, it's part of immigrant culture.
It's religious in our family.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's saving is a religion in our family. And we listened to our parents, mostly my mom, because she was the saver in the family.
Okay.
And we saw how hard she worked to save the money, her money, to put us towards, post-secondary educations and other things that we needed at the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then at some point, we go through this whole aspect of working, you get a job, and then you're out of school now, and you go down the rabbit hole of becoming a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
An educator.
Yeah.
Ron, you mentioned you also coach as well. We'll get into that as well. But teaching. So then you work a few years, then 20 years passes. Again, congratulations.
Yeah.
Or you have a good pension. We
Yeah.
know my aunt was a teacher as well. I have cousins that are teachers. We know lots of teacher friends.
Yep.
Good pension.
Yep.
One of the best in the Ontario.
Gold standard, some would say.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Then, I would beg to even challenge, but okay, well, if I'm making such good pension, why what happened at some point? Did you start saying, asking these questions about well, I think I'm saving enough, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not enough. Then what sparked that?
There was a couple of early moments in my career that led me to believe that, there was more than just saving my money. Again, I never explored, investing my money until I got into real estate.
Okay.
And before I got into real estate, there were moments where I remember one moment early in my career, maybe my first or second year, I sat down with some OGs in our school, and they just basically said, one, you don't need your RSP. You don't need to contribute into that because you're just going to get taxed on it later in life when you get a pension. So they basically gave me a crash course in financial literacy as a teacher.
Yeah.
That was one thing. And then another thing was there was, conversations about the pension being able to pay its members 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And at that time, it was really good, but they made some bigger moves back then that really got it to the gold standard that we know it as today.
Right.
And then you talk to a couple other people, and they're doing side hustles themselves, whether it's they're selling makeup or beauty items, or I remember one teacher was renting out their basement to MAC students who were nurses and so on. And it was just there's more to teaching other than just more to making money outside of teaching.
Yeah.
And, I've always felt like I had the sort of the entrepreneurial spirit, right? I can make something out of nothing, or I can do something more than what my job was from the 9 to 5, and I can hustle that way. And so all those little things led me to my first investment property. And that's what really got me thinking that, my pension, as great as it's going to be when I retire, I always knew that I kind of needed more, because I had some ambitions of what I wanted my retirement years to look like, my post-teaching years to look like, and even during my teaching years, how I wanted it to look like, right? Yeah. So, and as much as, I loved the work that I was doing, and it was, my job was paying for all the things that I needed, I knew I needed to sleep at night knowing my dollar was working hard for me. That was the one thing that really, kept me up at nights, because I'm like, well, I'm working every hour to get a salary, but that dollar that I'm earning just goes into the bank, and it earns, a measly 0.5% from the banks if you keep it in there for, 12 years. Yeah. So I knew that, when I heard the concept, have your money working for you while you're sleeping sort of led me to this rabbit hole of investment opportunities, and that led me to real estate as the first step into that realm of investment.
All right, we're gonna go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah,
it's like this concept that Ron mentioned, where the money you make if you're not making money while you're sleeping, you're gonna be working until you die.
Yep.
And that concept never held true until recently. Like, obviously, for me, the last few years has been really amped up.
Mm-hmm.
But similar to you, like sometime down the road when you're working and you kind of go through this and you realize, you're like, is it really just all about working and doing this?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like it's right. Even though we grew up, it seemed normal because our parents did it.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Did it.
My mom would work all the way in Markham from Oakville, and she'd take the bus.
Wow.
Not the GO train, like the city bus. And it would take her 2 hours each way because she wanted to save a few bucks at the end of the day.
Right.
And I remember picking her up late at night, 10 o'clock at, on the border of Mississauga, Oakville, because that's where the bus would drop her off. And we just pick her up 5 minutes away. And I just remember, I'm like, she's working so hard to save a few bucks.
Yeah.
And when she would go to sleep, those few bucks would go to sleep with her.
Yeah.
Right? Like it would rest in her bank account. It wouldn't work for her. And I remember those days where my dad worked 12-hour shifts, nights and days. And that was tough because I knew how difficult they lived working. And I didn't want to have that for myself, right? Let alone, when I have a family one day. So I knew I had to find a better way of using my time wisely, where I wasn't working hours to make money, right? I could work hours to make money and then use that money so it could work hours for me, right? Like, it's my employees. Like, that loonie that I just earned, I wanted it to make toonies. Yeah. And those toonies to multiply into $50 bills. Yeah. And so without me telling it what to do, right? It's just going to do its work. It's going to do its thing. And early on in life, saving was a big thing, but I also had a vision of what my lifestyle would look like, even as a teacher, even as when I retire, what it would look like, sort of my vision board, basically.
Yeah, so that's like this is really important as well to highlight. Like, Ron is painting his everyday rich, right? Mm-hmm. Even though when we're kind of going through the motions, it may not seem like we're actually drawing, like sketching out the canvas, but we really are filling it out. And as you kind of go through it, you start filling out more detail. And it sounded like you already started sketching that overall, like that, what you wanted. So at some point, you're like, hey, I need my money to go find more money soldiers and bring back more soldiers. Then leads you down to this real estate rabbit hole as well, right? Yeah. When did you start getting into real estate, and how was that? Like, how did you stumble into real estate? Because it's a big thing to just say, oh, I'm going to go buy some houses.
Well, I think it was one. I was at the time I was renewing my first home, my primary home. Yeah. And I remember the first few years I struggled. I didn't struggle, but I had to work a side job. I worked at Home Outfitters on top of my teaching job in the evenings and weekends to pay the mortgage because the house was under just me. And, 4 or 5 years later, it was time to renew, and the house went up in value. And, when I was speaking to the bank officer, the mortgage person, they said that you can do a couple things. One, you can continue paying your mortgage as is. You can take a line of equity, which is a line of credit, out, and use that money towards whatever you did. And I remember at the time I was talking to a banker who was fairly young, and I said to him, once I realized this huge, like 6-number figure in line of credit I could take out, I said, what do people do with this money? Yeah. And he says, well, they go on vacations, they buy cars. And I'm like, I don't want to go on vacation. I need to work more. I don't need to spend more money. I don't need a car. At the time I didn't have any significant others or kids or whatnot. So I said, like, what would you do with it? And he commented, well, if I had this money, I'd buy an investment property. I'm like, oh, tell me more. And he says, well, I went to the University of Western Ontario. I would buy a student rental at the University of Western Ontario. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, then it just got the wheels going.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, well, I went to Mac in Hamilton, and I thought to myself, I could easily buy a house there with this money, according to the mortgage broker.
Yep.
And he basically said, yeah, you could pretty much put a down payment or two on two houses, and fill it with students. And then it just started clicking. I'm like, well, if I got the money for the house, I work with students, so it's like I'm comfortable working with students. I know he said, like, that's not for everybody, and just like anything else, there's different strategies to different ways of making money in the same type of field. And some people were not, comfortable working with students. I was. I literally worked with students who were graduating to go on to university. So it just felt like it was a good fit for myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead of maybe a single family home to a family or a multi-family residence and so on. It felt like a student rental was for me.
Mm-hmm. And so after hearing about this guy, which shout out to this banker, whoever this young lad was, because you don't hear that very often.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, he probably wanted me to open up a mortgage account. So
okay, smart kid. So you helped him. So then, not knowing anything about real estate, you hear this bug.
Yeah.
Do you go out and buy something right away on your own, or do you, like, how does someone that just hears this, like, what was the next step? What did you do afterwards? Like,
well, so I was renewing sometime in the spring, and I can't remember if it was February or March. Maybe it was even as late as April. But I just remember I'm like, oh my God, like, I got to find out more about this. And at that time, like, the web was there. YouTube wasn't as established as it is now with 1,000 videos out there. Podcasts like yourself, like the Everyday Rich, wasn't available to listen to.
See, this is why he's great. Nice plug. Okay, what year was this? Just approximately.
This was probably 2010, 2011, just after the 2008 crash.
Oh, okay. So this is all right. This is a while back. Okay.
Yeah. So it's been I believe I celebrated 12 years of investing this past year. So yeah, it's been a.
I don't have the horn feature on my thing, so but that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
you
Ron
can edit that in.
Yeah. Ron started when he was 15. Okay, we work his age back. So okay, that's so awesome. So 2010, just after the crash, so real estate prices were probably really attractive. You go down the interweb.
Yep.
Who do you find? Is it someone that you?
Well, it's funny. Like, again, I didn't have a lot of resources back then, and so I knew a couple of colleagues who I worked with. Who was renting their basement to students. So I picked his brain. Okay. And then I had another colleague whose father was a real estate agent in Hamilton, which all worked out because I was like, okay, look, I need to talk to your dad and get from there. And so the one thing that I did right away was, like, put the wheels in motion. I need to absorb as much information as I can. And being the newbie to this space was very daunting. Yeah. And, if I had to go back, I would say do a lot of things differently.
Like what?
Well, I think I would have probably worked with someone with more of a real estate background in an agent. Not that they were bad for what I was doing, but I need someone with this who's done it before.
Like investor focused or?
Yeah, investor focused, student rental focused, like he was a good guy. Helped me get my first property that I still maintain today. But I think when it came to expanding my portfolio after that first one, I needed more guidance. And at the time, we didn't have all these coaching opportunities that we have today. We didn't have these podcasts, YouTube videos, or whatever accessible. So I needed to work with someone with a little bit more hands-on of the space that I wanted to get into. So that was the first thing. 2, I probably would have gotten a mentor or coach, someone that I could just pick their brain every other day.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a question, what do you do if this happens? What do you do if that happens? All sorts of things. And so basically I was learning right off what I was teaching myself. And, as much as, I'd like to think I'm a smart guy, it's really other people who make me look smart because I just follow what they do.
Yeah.
And those are things that I would have probably gone differently
Yeah.
or done differently back then, if I were to start again, or if I were to tell someone this is what you got to do.
Okay.
Right.
So then, did you go all into student rentals, those first few properties?
Yeah. It was, I think I probably had 3 or 4 within the first 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And, they were all student properties just because, again, like I said, I was very comfortable with the student space, the relationships I can build with students based on, my job. And I knew what they were looking for. I was actually a guidance counselor at that time. So I kind of knew what, what schools offer what programs. And if the kids were coming to me and saying, hey, I'm in nursing or engineering, what kind of engineering? Like I know engineers are party animals. So what kind of...
What are you talking about? We don't party at all. We do is study.
So yeah, like I just kind of had that relationship with students in my own building at my school. So I could sort of just translate like the communication, the interpersonal skills that I developed into real estate, basically.
See, Ron was really actually just building a Ponzi scheme because he had a big funnel of students that were like, oh, you're going to Mac? All right, well, I got the place just for you.
You know what? My first property, I filled it with, I filled it with 6 students, but they were all graduating. The following year, I filled it with a couple of students I knew from my school, just because they were looking and they knew I was in the space. And the years after, I had a few students where they stayed in my property. So it wasn't so much a Ponzi scheme. It was more of a, I trust you, like their parents trusted me to provide a good place for them.
He created a funnel. And I think that's the cool thing is that if a lot of us go through our day-to-day of 9 to 5, and a lot of us may not realize how much leverage we can use from the skills and the relationships that we build from our 9 to 5. I know in the entrepreneurial space, because you're mentioning like entrepreneurial, which we'll go on to next, is this whole thing of, okay, well, you work a 9 to 5, all you have is your 9 to 5. But really, if you tap into that, you can leverage so many different aspects of that, from your relationships to your resources to exactly what Ron did. Ron knew the system, knows the potential tenants coming in, and leverage that. So I would implore a lot of people to look outside the box within their box. Yeah. Right. Yes, you're in the confines of entrepreneurship, but how can you really use that to your advantage? And like you did really well. So,
I think what I did was I leveraged what I knew and what I did well into a different space. And so, when I talk careers, we call this transferable skills. Yeah. Right. Things like, leadership, communication, interpersonal. These can transfer into the workplace, into the home life, into, anything that you're doing. And I think what I did was I leveraged the skills that I learned through my job as an educator into the realm of real estate investing. And I think what I've talked to other people, especially when they're starting out, is what are you good at? What can you leverage that you're good at into investing, and how can you do it and do well at it? And so that's what I did. I mean, like, again, I worked not only with students but their parents, and so there had to be a trust of, hey, Ron as the educator was a great guy. How is Ron as the landlord? Right? And so, I mean, I'd like to say I have a 90% positive review of my students who rent from me. Higher as an educator, hopefully. But you just got to leverage what you know into something that you can do in different spaces. And I was able to do that early in my career as an investor, and it paid off. Like, I haven't bought a house in several years. I think those first 3 or 4 years that I got into investing, I realized I don't need more than I have now, and I guess I probably should have looked at more, but I was comfortable where I was. Right, my last investment property, which took me to 5 properties, was a former student of mine who I coached as well. Needed a place to stay, and so I, not convinced him, but I said, listen, if you need a place to stay, I'll buy the house. You rent it from me. You are the person who's going to fill it for me for the next 4 years that you're at this university. And I didn't have to fill it once.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, and so I leveraged my relationships with the people I worked with, and I was able to manufacture a situation that worked out for both of us. He got a good deal on rent. Mm-hmm. I got a house that was filled for 5 years, and fairly, the value of the home rose during those 4 or 5 years that I had it. So it worked out for everybody.
I want to add some context to color commentary to what we were just mentioning to someone that might be listening here and really wondering, holy crap, how did someone go for 5? But you also mentioned this thing about I could have bought more.
Yep.
The key thing is coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But really, it wrapped around what Ron's goals were, and right now his family, right?
Yep.
So these things change, and we live into this space where if you're on social media and you follow the real estate, the stock market, or whatever, the real estate circle, it's all about buy.
How many doors do you have?
Hey, Ron, first, how many doors do you have? What? Okay. That doesn't matter. What matters is what the doors are doing for you. How many doors do you need, right? Versus me comparing about, well, he's got 12 doors. I have 6. Oh, no, it's not doing really good for me.
Yeah.
One property can change someone's life. 5, obviously, a little bit more. But does adding 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 make a huge difference for Ron? We don't know. Only Ron can answer.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where if you're listening to this is that you need to ask yourself the why. Why would you need more? And how, if adding more, does that change your life to another everyday rich, your new everyday rich?
Yeah.
So just please be cognizant of that, because I think we're in this society where it spews so much Kool-Aid for you to just buy without realizing, do I need to buy all this?
Yeah.
Because I know people that have 4 properties.
Yep.
They're all paid off.
Yep.
And they're like, they all cash flow $3,000 a month. What do I need more for?
Yep.
I get $12,000 of cash flow.
Yeah. When I first started, I had this round number of 10 properties.
Yeah.
And I think when you start out, you're like, hey, I can, you get a couple and you're like, yeah, 10 seems realistic at some point. When I got to 4 and then the 5th one came along, I was doing all the work. I didn't hire a property manager. This was just like work ethic that I learned from my parents. Like, if you could do it yourself, why would you outsource it, right?
Fair.
And at the time, again, I didn't have family that I had to be around, right, to look after. So I had, weekends after school, summers where I could focus on those properties and really take care of it. And what the 5th one told me was like, I don't need more than what I have now, right? Like, all of them were cash flowing well. And I didn't need more than what I was earning back then with 5 properties as opposed to 10 properties. Yeah, 10 properties would have been great because I would have probably had more money. But at the same time, then you got to think about what kind of life are you going to live, right? And I didn't want to I already spent a good chunk of my time looking after these 4 or 5 properties that I had. It would have another 4 or 5 would have meant more time away from what I wanted to do, which was, maybe take some road trips, maybe hang out with family and friends, maybe was doing a passion hobby that I wanted. It would just take away from all of that. And I was comfortable with the 5. And I think when we get into this rabbit hole of I got to build my empire for what? And I think that goes to your philosophy, the everyday rich. I was everyday rich with 5 properties, with even 4. The 5th one just happened to be former student calls me up and says, "Hey, I'm moving back. Do you have a place to stay?" And I said, "Well, you know what? I don't, but let's look for it." And so the opportunity was there. And I just felt that my everyday rich didn't encompass, Lamborghinis and multiple trips throughout the year and so on. I just wanted to live comfortably without having to worry about, the next paycheck's going to pay to this and pay to that, and I just didn't want to be in that space that my parents, I felt growing up, had to go through.
Yeah.
And so my upbringing, I knew that they'd gone through that. I didn't want to go through that. I wasn't going through that, so I didn't need to do more than that.
Yeah.
And so, maybe it costed me some more wealth down the line, but like I could happily say there's not one thing I would regret. I would go back and do again, aside from a couple things.
All right. Okay. There's so much, but I wanna take something you mentioned, which was you leveraged the skills that you had from your teaching, and you leveraged skills from just outside of things to apply to a lot of different things. And at some point, you started leveraging your skills and say, "Hey, real estate's good. The stock market thing's kind of interesting." And you went down the rabbit hole of getting to the stock market, specifically with trading.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into trading? Like same with the real estate. What led you down? Because now you have 5 properties and you're like, "Hey, this seems pretty good. You got a great job, whatnot." And you're kind of building that, your mini empire right now. Why would Ron, the successful person that has, he's developed his everyday rich so far, want to venture into something so risky like stock market and the trading?
I've always had a curiosity about it. And I remember in university, my first foray into the stock market was reading a little bit about it. And then I took a road trip in the summer out east. And I remember to myself that I had to buy this one stock that everyone kept saying was going to go to the moon. And I said to myself, so I pulled over. I had opened an account before this road trip, and I had put money in, but I never actually bought a stock.
Yeah.
And I remember I pulled over into a local library, opened up, the dial-up internet, and you can hear it just dialing up. And now I'm all of a sudden in my my broker account, and I'm ready to buy, I don't know how many shares, but I had $5,000 worth of money in there. So I bought as much as I could. And I went on my trip. I didn't think about it. And then probably a year later, like I look at it,
yeah.
It kept just going down. And at some point I was just like, I was disinterested because I didn't know what to do. Again, like the resources back then weren't readily available to you. You actually had to go speak to people, and I just didn't do that. And so I gave up on it at that time because it wasn't profitable for me.
Do you remember what ticker this was?
Man, I wish I could remember everything about that stock that I invested in, but I tried to look at past reports and so on that I had, which I don't anymore. And I know I can't remember it. I knew it was a tech stock, like an up and coming tech stock, because everyone's going to say it's going to go to the moon. This is the next revolutionary, whatever. And, I believe the hype instead of doing my work. And so a few years ago, pre-pandemic, just before the pandemic, I had another opportunity, and I went into the stock market course because it was being hosted by someone I had known and trusted wasn't going to mislead me. Because you see a lot, like when you open up your, even YouTube, you can see the algorithms are going to work, and they're trying to sell you courses on stocks and so on. And I'm like, I don't have time for this.
3 free stocks
if
you join Rebull.
Yeah, exactly. So I went with someone that I trusted.
Yep.
He was putting on a course with other people, and it was one of those things where I could happily say elevated my game in terms of investing and wealth creation another notch. And
well, this is almost the same thing about mentoring, right?
Yep.
We know this person mutually, so
Yep.
it's the same thing I started out with as well, into the trading realm.
Yep.
But then you're like saying, okay, well, you know what? They're looking into this. Let me take a look into this. And you got into this, right?
But not at first. I'll be honest.
Okay.
I was very hesitant because, again, it wasn't because I was afraid of the stock market. I was just afraid of, like, there's other ways of buying and selling stocks, buying, holding, and selling stocks. Like, options was completely new to me. And so I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And so I hesitated at first. The friend I'm talking about was someone I trusted in real estate.
Yep.
And he's an entrepreneur, Erwin Zito.
Shout out to Erwin.
Yeah, big shout out to him. Helped elevate and my whole entire financial game just by listening to him. Anyways, he put on a course and he invited me out to the beta course, which was like, the pre-opening before the grand opening.
Yeah, I was supposed to go to that one.
Oh, were you?
Yeah,
okay.
I had to go to a trip, so I got to cancel it. So.
My wife was pregnant at the time, so I couldn't literally. It was the weekend before my wife was supposed to give birth to our first daughter, and spending a whole weekend in a course, knowing that she could go at any minute, wasn't ideal. So when he did have the grand opening a few months after, I made sure to attend that one. But I was hesitant.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know much about it, and
Yeah, and it's not often that I think people just pick up and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to get into the stock trading, let alone stock investing, and then dial it up a notch and say, I'm going to get right into options.
Yes, which was the riskiest part of what the stock market is if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah,
and I had no clue.
Exactly, and I want to precursor that, like, if you've never done options before, do not go to the options right away with a lot of money. So just take that with a grain of salt,
or do it blindly.
Yes,
right. Like that's the important thing. If you can go into it knowing what it's all about, and you have a good risk reward approach to it, just like buying and selling, then I think you could be fine. But having said that, I would say learn the market first.
Okay. So there's these, I would say, more easier basic concepts that you learned, that we all learned together.
Yeah.
And you eventually start, I would say, seeing some success, right? Some consistency in that. And the market was absolutely hot in that time, right? It just, this bull cycle from COVID that just, it felt like you were mentioning.
Years before that.
To the moon, right? Like, we were already riding that.
Yep.
The COVID was just a blip. But everything seemed like it couldn't fall, right? Every trade we went into was just like, I can't lose.
Right.
I can't lose.
Yeah.
And I know there was a period in your time where it started doing really well, and then there was a moment where you caught something that was amazing, right?
Yeah.
I won't go into the details here, but because you immersed yourself, it was like, did you immerse yourself into this?
I did. You know what? Like, once I got into real estate investing, I immersed myself in that while I had it. And then I realized this is all I need from real estate. When the stock trading came up, or the stock market came up, I said to myself, this could be the diversity I'm looking for when it comes to investing. And when you hear people talk about, wealthy people who have made money, real estate, the stock market are two things that they venture into. Absolutely. Along with, having businesses of your own. So you're creating that multiple income stream. Yeah. And so I wanted to do that. Yeah. And you know what? Stock markets, you don't deal with tenants. Yeah. You don't deal with the headaches that go along with being a landlord of a property. So I thought to myself, I'm going to immerse myself in these first couple of years and see what I can do. And so I would say that I've, been okay at it, been good at it these last few years, and just hoping that, I can turn my experience these last few years into, many more successful years.
I would say here, let me ask it this way. In the past few years, would you say the successes you had, some of these wins were life-changing?
100%.
Okay.
I think you have to take that step, like in anything else that you're going to do, and know the risk reward to it. I knew the risk was going to be potentially losing money. How much that will be dependent on me. But I also knew the reward, kind of like real estate, would provide me with more financial wealth, freedom that I was looking for on top of, just having the real estate.
Yeah.
And, like the risk reward, like once you go into something, you have to weigh the risk reward for your own self and those obviously look after as well.
Yeah, and that's a key thing too, is that when you get into trading, it's very different than investing. So I know a lot of investors got into the trading world right around COVID because there was nothing to do. And there's a lot of these...
these courses were pumping out.
Absolutely.
Like the advertisement, the word of mouth. And you know what? Like, I get it. Like at that time, like you said, you couldn't lose on a trade, especially if you're doing options. It drew more people in. People were making money hand over fist. Like you could close your eyes, throw a dart on that dartboard, and you'd be successful in whatever trade you got into. Yeah. And you know what? I'll be honest. That was a lot of my success as well, on top of the additional work that I did.
Yeah, and I do want to say this is that regardless of if we're in a bull cycle or bear cycle and whatnot, the thing is that you immerse yourself and you really kind of put yourself head first. And you just said, you know what? I've learned this about real estate. I can apply the same mentality of learning about this instrument, whether it was options or the stock or just straight out stocks or whatever. It was about, how do I go about doing this, the action of trading, let alone just buy, hold. Because now you've learned how to trade. You know how to buy stocks. It teaches you, well, I can buy the stock and just leave it there.
Yeah.
But then it also gives you this level of flexibility and freedom where, like you said, you don't have to deal with tenants.
Yep.
You don't have to deal with angry parents or anything like that, a roof breaking. All you got to deal with is a good internet connection and a computer anywhere in the world.
Right. And
I remember, a few years ago after meeting with Ron through this network, and we started going down this rabbit hole of trading, there'd be days where we'd be both talking to each other and be like, oh, did you take that Tesla trade? I remember this one time I was talking, we were looking at something. I was like, oh, this Tesla setup is looking good. And you're like, oh, thank you. Yeah. And this guy was at the movies with his kids. Yeah. And he just made like $800 off of a Tesla trade in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? For me, I didn't even see. I just saw it. I wasn't even playing it. But then, Ron being where he was so immersed in it and just took it, made it. Yeah. And that's the thing where I think a lot of us is that if you're going to go down a rabbit hole, commit to it. Put a lot of your energy into that and say, you know what, I'm going to learn as much as I can. Win, lose, whatever. I'm just going to learn because I need to be able to figure out, can I do this? Because a lot of people will say, don't do it. Yeah. You're going to lose all your money, which, fine, that's okay. Yeah. But you're going to come out of this potentially with this life-changing skill that you never heard of until, obviously, recently.
Yeah. I think that story that you highlighted about, taking that Tesla trade, a couple things. One, I think when you surround yourself with the right people that you can trust, they make your net worth bigger. And maybe not in money value, but just in knowledge, in trust. Because I know when you mentioned that, I know you did your work, your homework on the trade. And, I was at the mall, not the movies, with my daughters. I remember that trade as well. We were seeing The Grinch at one of the malls, which my daughters love, which is, funny altogether. But I remember looking on my phone, and again, I rarely trade from my phone these days. Yeah. But at that time, I did a little bit. And when you said it, I was like, oh, the chart looks pretty good. I'm going to get into it. Yeah. And you're right. And so my trust in you, in your vision, in what you saw, allowed me to be confident in going into a position. It's just like you say, hey, I saw this house down the street and got great fundamentals, the numbers work, And you hear stories where buyers would just buy a house without even stepping on the property.
Yeah.
That was the same thing with me in that Tesla trade with you.
Yeah.
Like I trusted you because you do your work on, setups and charts and stocks and so on, that I knew my risk reward is what it is.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, and the thing is, what Ron was able to, thank you for that. This actually goes the other way. Ron also leveraged part of this, his teaching ability, his educator skill, his superpower, and really kind of just started this little convo that between other people that were interested in trading.
Yeah.
And it was all about not like, okay, well, how much, obviously, how much money can we all make? But like, how can we teach each other? Because like, Ron sees things differently on a chart. Right. I see it differently. Yeah. Our trading mentor, I would say, sees things completely out of this
world.
Well,
when you have 20 years of experience,
trading experience, it
helps.
But the thing is that all these people, when it, like, at sometimes you're like, okay, why don't you tell everyone what you're seeing? Yeah. Right. You put me in a really tough spot of like, okay, well, what are you seeing? Explain it.
I firmly believe that, it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
I think when you have a number of people contributing to the growth of any one individual, makes that one individual stronger because they're able to absorb different perspectives. And that's what I tried to do. Haven't done it recently, but I tried to hold a weekly, chart reading setup situation where we jump on a Zoom call and for a couple hours we would go through stocks, we would go through strategies, we would go through, and teaching it helped me learn and reinforce what I believed in as well, right? Like if you were to ask me to teach a curriculum document, I could. Mm-hmm. And by teaching it, I'd learn the material just as much as the students would, because it would reinforce what I already knew. Maybe it would add on some different perspectives that I know. So by doing that, it allowed me to teach myself again and reinforce my knowledge of what I was sharing with you guys, and vice versa. Like I remember, again, we shared different perspectives, and I think having different perspectives is good, because the stock market, the real estate, any other investment opportunities has different perspectives, and you want to know what other people are seeing along with what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And if now that you've kind of done all these things, right? You've taken all these things and you really found kind of like what you really enjoy. I would say you figured out what you really enjoy, what works for you, what fits your everyday rich. If someone wants to basically go into stock options or real estate or trading, what's the first piece of advice you would give someone?
I'd say find a well-respected mentor, coach, person that you could just seek out the basic answers, right? And from there, just find out as much as you can know. And let's be honest, the University of YouTube is a fantastic place to start. There's a lot of videos out there on different things. I know my wife comes down in the middle after the kids go to sleep, and she sees me watching YouTube videos on lawns, and different lawns and how to do it. It's hilarious, because she just this is like the standard for me every night, because I'm watching. So you can watch on any subject. So stock market, different strategies, real estate, different strategies for that. You can find it all on the internet nowadays.
But at some point, how do you filter out the noise, Ron? Like, how do you filter out? Because the lawn is one thing. Lawn is like, what? I'll throw a bunch of stuff on my grass. I'm okay if it dies. But you know what? When I start throwing money around, I may not be okay with losing my money. So how do you filter that?
Well, I think you got to immerse yourself in that space. And then from your knowledge, from what you've absorbed, you're going to be seeing what you can filter out to begin with. What's going to work, what's not going to work for you. Then it goes to, again, having someone to rely on, a coach, a mentor, to really talk about, some of the answers that you're looking for when it comes to the big questions, right? And, that means how do I get started?
Yeah.
Where does the money come from? You know, how can I get from where I am now to where you are at that time?
Yeah.
And it's often, you know, a turtle race.
Yeah.
And it's a marathon. You don't want to race. You don't want to sprint through this. You want to take your time. And I think a lot of people just want to make that almighty dollar instantly.
Yep.
Or million.
Yep.
In this case, right?
Yep.
And I think you got to look at, you know, where you are and where you want to be. How you get there is just as important as getting there.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
So then, as we kind of wrap this up and get closer here, there's a little segment that Jen and I like to do here.
Is this like a rapid fire situation?
Kind of, but
okay.
A bit more fun. So
okay, fair.
All right. It's our Crazy Rich Asians and Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Okay.
Segment. Okay. So I know basketball is one of your, I would say, passions. You enjoy you coach. Yep. Did you play before?
Nope.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I did not enjoy playing because I would look at the game through a coach's lens and get pissed off at people I was playing with.
Coach Popovich right here.
Yeah, and doing it. So I'd rather be just like pissed off at people I'm coaching at instead of playing with. Even a pickup game. I'm competitive by nature.
Yeah.
And I just remember I hate playing with people who don't know what they're doing. And that was, and you know, I could have done it. I could have played better and not hide my frustration so well. You can talk to Ashley. We played dodgeball, trampoline dodgeball with some friends of ours, and I got so mad at her so many times because she wasn't as competitive as I was. So suffice to say, it was quiet drives home after those games.
I can totally relate to you too, because Jen's like, hey, maybe we could go golf together, right? And I'm like, we could, but I don't want to file for divorce papers.
Yeah, I love you.
Yeah, I love you, but I don't love you that much. So, you know, so I'm competitive as well with sports. Yeah. It's just like, I don't know if I could go through that with you.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. So, greatest Raptor of all time.
Raptor?
Greatest Toronto Raptor of all time.
You got to go with Kyle Lowry.
Kyle Lowry?
I think he's been a great ambassador for the Raps. I don't think you can go wrong with him as your GROAT, your greatest Raptor of all time.
Shout out to Kyle Lowry.
Yep.
Hopefully he signs a one-day contract when he retires.
He will. He's already said it, but I have no doubt that he will.
Awesome. Okay. All right. If you had to, okay, minivan or a big SUV? Because I know you're looking into something like this.
Oh, yeah, we are. I'm into the space where I'm mentally preparing my wife to drive a minivan, and she loves anything but a minivan. So I'm going to go with big SUV, but for purposes of expanding families and space, a minivan is the way to go.
I know. So I'm with Ashley. Like, I'm like, you know what?
It ruins the vibe.
It does.
And I'm like, have you ever driven a van before? I grew up in a van.
Same here.
I grew up in a van. My dad drove a Ford Windstar for many years.
The Windstar, yes.
Or an Aerostar. And I just remember those vans were all the funniest times I had. All the trouble, the fun, the games, the fun you would have in the back seats with your brothers on the way to like wherever or friends. It was great.
You know, okay, so I had to go road trip once in the vans. Yeah. And you know the third row sometimes could slide out or be taken out?
Yeah.
We slid the whole row up. And my brother and I and like maybe a cousin or something or a friend, we were in the back area playing with toys while we're driving.
I know.
Like, this is unheard of. You're driving and you're not even belted in a seat. We're just on the floor.
Back then it was a little bit more suspect.
Wild West.
Yeah.
Sus.
Yeah. You could get away with if you unbuckled seats there.
We should have buckled them in. All right. Okay. Recently there's a lot of comedians that have come out and have highlighted some Filipino culture. Mm-hmm. And you might know what I'm talking about, but have you ever used a tabo?
Yes.
Okay.
Growing up.
So, what's a tabo, Ron?
Well, let's just put it this way. If you ever see a cup in a bathroom of a Filipino-owned house next to the toilet, I would highly suggest you don't drink from it.
Or rinse your mouth with it.
Or rinse just the only thing that should be touching it or the water in it is your hands, and after that, you wash your hands like you do anything else. You do your business.
So that's basically the Filipino bidet, okay?
Yes.
That's what it is. It's an ass washing cup.
Yes, exactly.
All right, okay. A few more. All right, you're not a breakfast guy. Okay,
Nope.
I understand you're not a
Nope.
breakfast guy. But if you had to pick, okay, McDonald's sausage egg McMuffin
Cool.
or Filipino tocino or longanisa?
Oh, I guess it depends on the situation. Like, I'm going to be honest. If I had rice the night before, a sausage McMuffin would probably hit the spot. But nothing beats a tocino with rice in the morning sometimes. I remember I again, here's me storytelling, but
No, please.
I went to the Philippines, and I wasn't a breakfast person, again, like you mentioned. And so me and my family would sit down, and they would eat, and they ordered tocino with rice. And it looked so delicious. And I remember I'm like, that looks good. So I ordered. I must have ordered, and there were smaller portions, but I must have ordered 3 of them. And I was like, this is the best ever. And again, it's like 8 a.m. in the morning. I don't want to eat. I'm not like, and the reason why is because I normally had a late dinner.
Yeah.
So I'm not hungry. But like, yeah, it's situational.
Okay.
Not gonna lie,
Right.
it's situational.
I'm sure it tastes so much better being in the Philippines than it is the stuff you get here.
It was good. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. If you had to coach any professional sports team, which sport would you coach, and which team would you coach?
Interesting. I wouldn't go into basketball because I feel like I know the space well enough that I'm like, you know what, I want to learn something new.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I'd love to learn about football, like the American football.
American football? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not a big football fan to begin with. Like, I'll watch some games if it's on TV. But
so many rules.
I know. But for me, I think I would love to learn it at the collegiate level.
Okay.
Just because, you know, like any other business, you've got departments, you've got different coaching staffs, you got different realities, how they put things together, how they, you know, work with their players. It's kind of like a business. And I think, you know, like any other sport, I'm sure, they operate sometimes in silos so they could do their job better. So special teams work with special teams. The defense or the linemen on the defensive end work together, and they have special meetings. So having all of these departments go separately and then come back and play together, it's mind blowing. And then you add on school on top of that. How are they able to manage them? How are they able to manage, you know, the noise outside of football when it comes to school and friends and parties and all that stuff? Like, I think I would love to learn it from that end, just because I think there's something that I can transfer from that scenario into my daily work or my investing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, last one, okay? So, diagonal lines, vertical or horizontal lines on the lawn?
Diamonds on the grass.
Diamonds
on the grass. I actually, before this, I put some lines, some stripes on my grass before the heat of the day came and stressed it out. So diamonds horizontally one way. Oh, sorry. Diagonally one way, diagonally the other way.
See, this is what happens when you go down the YouTube rabbit hole of lawn care.
Yep.
And then we text each other about the type of fertilizer and lines.
Yeah.
It's like, this is so nerdy. Like,
Yeah.
Jen's like, you guys are nerds. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I know.
Ashley would laugh at me, or she'd shake her head, and then I'm sure she laughs at internally. But I know she's happy about my you know, outside of work, family life activities. I'm not doing anything I shouldn't be doing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it goes back to this: is Ron's creating his everyday rich, right?
Yep.
And hopefully, the journey and stories that Ron shared today about his upbringing, his foray into real estate, and then taking that and using his knowledge to look into I'm going to say the stock market, which has been life-changing for him, to now playing with his lawn, is you create your journey, and you have to start somewhere. And Ron started somewhere just like a lot of people. And you might not realize, like, I don't know where to start, but there's so many places. And hopefully this is one of those living room conversations that you could take and ask yourself some questions about, like, okay, what can I do to put myself in a position to live my everyday rich, or live an everyday rich that you want to? So if it's been helpful to you, if you've found this, that, you know, it gave you some clarity or whatever, maybe it didn't, I don't know, it doesn't matter. Like, subscribe, help us by sharing it, because then hopefully those conversations really empower you to do the best you can with your journey. Ron, is there, I know you're not a big social media guy, but we won't post it if you don't want to.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. So where can we find you on social media?
Well, I have an Instagram and Twitter account. I don't know it off by hand.
Okay, we'll figure it out. We'll find it.
Maybe you'll post it on one of the things. But like you mentioned, learning never stops. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm like, you know, how can I make my situation better? And, you know, it went from teaching to real estate to stock market, and now I'm going into this world of infinite banking, where I'm like trying to create generational wealth. I'm not just creating wealth for myself now. I'm thinking 20, 30 years from now, when my kids could use that money from the work I do now. So this is like, I'm thinking long term now. Just like if you were to start out with anything, I'm immersing myself into that world. I'm actually looking to get my license as an agent as well.
All right, then. This might be a part 2 later on with infinite banking and Ron Esteban. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate you joining. This was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
And let's, I don't know, let's go have some lunch. I don't know. But everyone, thank you very much. Appreciate Jen. Thanks. Jen would love to be here, but she'll watch the replay.
You can have your chair back, Jen.
He's got a new ass print on it. So. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Peace.
Your Everyday Rich podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. Any such information or other material should not be construed as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional.